Matt Miguez has plenty on his mind, and he's ready to share it with the world. It's time to hear the Miguez Mindset.
Welcome into the Miguez Mindset here on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Lake Charles. Matt Miguez here talking New Orleans Saints as we head into the summer OTAs in full swing. A lot to get to from Airline Drive. Chris Rosvoglou joins me from the Straight Up Saints podcast. Chris, good afternoon, man. Thanks for taking the time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
So I want to dive into the latest news, and that is, of course, the injury to Tanoh Kpassagnon, a torn Achilles suffered during the offseason, out indefinitely. What was the wording used from Dennis Allen? Have we heard anything, or have you heard anything about when this injury may have occurred and the timeline that we're looking at? Or are we still kind of up in the air on that?
The first part up in the air, I think, one thing the Saints have been good at is they'll kind of tell you what the injury is, but they might leave a couple of details out as to the exact specifics. But what I found really interesting about it was they haven't said he's out for the season. So that makes me think that it may have been even earlier than, this week when it happened. And then Dennis Allen reports it to the media. So for them to keep the door open, I'd imagine it was a little bit earlier because, man, an Achilles injury, I know people are getting faster with the recovery times and whatnot, but it still seems like that for a defensive line, you're trying to get off the snap and have that burst. That, if you're able to come back at some point late in the season, then maybe it was earlier. So still up in the air, but we'll see. Obviously, it's not ideal for the defensive line because there was already some question marks surrounding it.
Now, so how does this affect the defensive line? Because, typically you like to carry 8 to 9 guys. And when you look at the line and, start speculating and making predictions, it kind of felt like Tanoh might be the odd man out. Because obviously you're not going to move on from Cam Jordan. You just re-signed Carl Granderson. You've got Kalen Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Brian Bresee. And then, you want to give another chance to Peyton Turner, who, you hope could stay healthy for a full season. And then, of course, Isaiah Foskey didn't get a whole lot of opportunity in his rookie season. You'd want to keep him around. So Tanoh felt like he could be just that guy on the outside looking in. But now, since he'll start the season on probably the PUP list, maybe IR, how does that change things for the defensive line?
Yeah, it's interesting because to some degree, I don't think the Saints wanted to go into this season saying, oh, we need Tanoh to be an impact player because they obviously have talent on there. But the problem is a lot of that talent comes with, an asterisk of, I don't know if they're going to be healthy. Like, I think Peyton Turner actually is a good football player. Like, I don't think it's a question of whether or not he can play. I just think he's not able to play due to health. Like, I think there is talent there. Chase Young, obviously with the neck injury, there's no question about Chase Young. He's a good football player. He can be a disruptor, but what is the timeline for him? How much burst does he have? So that's a question mark there. Obviously you feel good about Carl Granderson. I think he had a really nice 2023 season. And then Cam Jordan, I know the Saints still love him as a run defender. I obviously, in terms of the trajectory of his career, it's on the downslope now because of age, but at least you can use him as a run defender. There's two questions for me. It's, do the Saints feel confident when they go to those, heavy pass rush packages to have someone next to Brian Bresee? Because Tano's had that versatility where, yeah, you usually leave him on the outside, but he can rush from the inside. So you kind of lose that piece. And I'm very curious to see how the Saints replace that aspect of their defense, because there are moments where he's there and he plays well. And I just think there's a reliability to him. Like, he's not, a household name. He's not a guy that's going to get you 10 sacks, but the Saints can rely on him to get them a couple and play in spot moments. So just to lose that and now focus on guys that unfortunately have, injuries that have riddled them the last couple of years, that's a concern. But concern also brings up opportunity. And a guy that I would look at is Isaiah Foskey, and hoping that he can turn the corner, because he's in that weird spot where it's not that I don't think he can play, and it's not that he's not healthy. We just haven't seen it, period.
Correct.
And, he was a great player at Notre Dame. I'd love to see him, hit his stride. And he's had a couple moments here so far in OTAs where he's made some big plays, but he's got to string together consistency. And I don't know, maybe this opens the door for him. So I think I'd be more concerned if the Saints didn't have talent. My real concern is, can these guys stay healthy? And to lose some depth early on hurts a bit. I can't lie about that aspect of it.
To add on to the can guys stay healthy question, Chase Young was a controversial signing a couple months ago. Obviously, former number 2 overall pick, has shown promise when he's able to be on the field, but that's kind of been the issue. He's not really on the field as much as teams would have liked him to be, which was why he was a free agent. The Saints get him for pretty cheap, and then the day after he signed, you find out he has to have a neck procedure and his availability for the offseason is kind of gone. So, talk to me about, where the team stands with that. What's the latest updates you've gotten on Chase Young? And, is there any shot that he participates in the offseason at all?
Yeah, this is interesting. So far it seems like it's just par for the course from what they've said, but unfortunately that means that at best you see him maybe late first week, second week of training camp. That's kind of what I'm expecting right now. I don't see him playing for the Saints anytime soon till we get to late July, early August. And it is unfortunate because that was one of those signings where I think, yeah, there's risk to it, but there's only risk for the 1 year, and the Saints can afford to take a shot on a guy like that because it's a position of need. And what if he ends up being the Chase Young of old? Then you may have solved your pass rushing problem. So
Correct.
I think the Saints are going to be careful with him. The way the contract structured, it's not really a detriment to them if he misses time. So I think there is that added incentive for Chase Young where I got to make sure the minute that the doctors give me the green light that he attacks his process of getting back on the field because there's a lot of money at stake for him. So the Saints haven't said anything different about him suffering setbacks, which is obviously good. I'd imagine we'll get an update though from Dennis Allen once we get to mandatory minicamp because pretty much everyone will be there or at least should be there, and he'll be asked about him at least once or twice. So no setbacks, which is a good thing, but nothing to tell us right now that hey, we'll see him in June. My guess, again, late July, early
Yep.
August is we'll probably see him in action.
Flipping over to the offense, obviously there's, a new offensive system. Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator. Taysom Hill was asked about the new offense, and Taysom said that he's been asked to do things that he's never done before. As somebody that covers the Saints, as a Saints fan, does that make you happy? Does that concern you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's actually exciting. And the reason I say that is, I will miss the QB power element of Taysom Hill because I think that might be scrapped off the board. We haven't really seen him line up at quarterback at all so far. And that's not to say the Saints won't do it. I just think that's not in Clint Kubiak's MO. That's not what he wants to run. So you take that part out. But I think there's so many times during the course of a game where I could say, the Saints need a little bit more Taysom Hill in their life. And I think that they might do that with Clint Kubiak. And the fact that we've seen him line up at fullback, we've seen him line up out of the backfield and take a couple handoffs from Derek Carr. We've seen him at the tight end position, which we know he can do. And I think the one exciting one is we've seen him in the slot a little bit now too. And I think that might open up possibilities. And we think about what San Francisco's done the last couple of years. And I know Clint was only there for last season, but they're so good at making sure they just get the ball in their best players' hands. And I think for the Saints right now, they have a lot of talent on offense. Like I love the duo of Olave and Shaheed, but outside of that, you're wondering who's going to step up. I think Taysom will if he gets those opportunities. And, he did, like you mentioned, say it's stuff that he hasn't done before. But the one thing I love about Taysom, even if he doesn't necessarily love the idea that might be pitched to him, he loves this game too much to not give it his all, and he absolutely will. So I think for a Saints team that is lacking a little bit of proven playmakers at the moment, I think getting Taysom in a multifaceted role is going to do wonders for him. And it should make life easier for Derek Carr. And obviously the Saints are trying to accomplish that goal.
Chatting with Chris Rosvoglou here on the Miguez Mindset. The Ryan Ramczyk injury is another big storyline. None of us are really sure, where he stands heading into the 2024 season. Some people are saying he may never play football again. So in your opinion, right now, who's the five up front for the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, it's fascinating because the Saints right now, what they have constructed at the moment, there's nothing to say for certain that that's how it'll be. But obviously, you pencil in McCoy at center and Ruiz at right guard; those seem to be certains. Fuaga's going to start. I think it's just a question of where they start him. They've been giving him double the amount of reps at left tackle than you normally would for a guy coming in. So they want to see what that process is for him in that ramp up period. But so far, he's been handling it decently well. The Saints haven't been discouraged. So he's going to start. It's a matter of if he ends up starting at left or right tackle. The interesting thing one for me will be Penning because although he's saying all the right things and he is excited about getting a clean slate, there are moments where he's kind of struggled so far at OTAs. And I know it's early. And I think the good thing for him is he'll have that, month and a half to get himself ready for training camp. And that's where you want to see the growth. And, I talked about this earlier this week and it was about his progression. And there's going to be struggles. The question is, how did the Saints handle it? Because last year, Trevor Penning struggled, and it was almost like, okay, you're benched. This year, are you going to try to work him through the struggles, or are you just going to slide in Landon Young as the other offensive tackle? Because Landon, someone that they kind of like as the break glass emergency type of player to put in there. So right now I'll still go with Penning as the other tackle because I think the Saints want to make it work. And there is that kind of urgency to say, let's not throw away a first-round pick after 2 seasons when we don't really know what he can do with a full slate. So I think he will start. And then Nick Saldiveri, the Saints like him. There hasn't been anything that's been concerning at all with him. I think the question is just how does he handle the actual game reps in the preseason? And if he handles those well, then I think he could get the left guard spot. And for the Saints, there's a lot of unknown in that group, but similar to the defensive line, the unknown could end up being a good thing if all these guys hit their full ceilings, although obviously the odds of it happening aren't that high. But right now, Fuaga, Saldiveri, McCoy, Ruiz, and Penning seems to be the case, but I wouldn't rule out Landon Young as the right tackle if Trevor Penning doesn't progress.
Chris, talking about the rookies, obviously you brought up Taliesin Fuaga, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Spencer Rattler. Talk to me about this rookie class. What's kind of stood out from rookie minicamp into OTAs? Who's made a quick first impression?
Yeah, so, one guy that you don't really consider him, let's say, a rookie because he's not part of the draft class, but, you bring in Charlie Smythe, the kicker from the international program, and he's got a leg on him. And this isn't to say that he's going to beat Blake Grupe for the job, but I do think there is a serious competition there. And preseason games are kind of the determining factors for kickers. It's very hard to simulate the game situation in practice because there isn't that pressure. You're not in this, in the Superdome with thousands of fans watching and your team depending on you. So I think that's one part to watch. I would say looking at the tight ends, it's very interesting because Holker from Colorado State has an opportunity here on a weak position group to make an impact. But Michael Jacobson, a former college basketball player who isn't a rookie, but it almost feels like this is his first actual chance at making an impact at the tight end spot. He has made some noise so far in OTAs in the early spots. So he's been intriguing. I'd say, one guy that there's good and bad with him is Bub Means. It feels like one play he makes is a game-breaking one, and then the next one, you'd rather see him fight for the ball a little bit harder. So he's a player that I would probably just pencil in on a little bit more and see what you get out of him on a consistent basis, but there's absolutely talent there. And other than that, for the Saints, it's been a little bit of good and bad. Spencer Rattler's kind of been on the downtrend this week, but I think the exciting thing for him is we know the talent's there. And similar to what I said about Penning, he's kind of getting his feet wet. How do you respond? And that's going to be the beautiful thing because Jake Haener, last year had moments where he looked great and then slipped up. So I'm excited to see how Spencer bounced back. But I'd say right now, the tight end spot's a little interesting. We got a lot of new names that have a chance here to fight for a spot on the 53.
Last question I've got for you. It's being rumored that Drew Brees is the newest member of the Saints Hall of Fame class of 2024. Clearly not a surprise. But what are your thoughts on Drew getting inducted so quickly?
Yeah, it had to be done, right? Drew Brees is, there's so many people that love the Saints, and it might be strictly because of Drew Brees. And the one thing I loved about Drew, regardless of whether the teams were stacked or the teams were, those 7-9 periods, I never felt like the Saints didn't have a chance to win. And it was because of number 9, because he could just go just absolutely nuclear at any moment. I'll think even back then when the defense wasn't great and you get into a 52-49 shootout against the Giants, and I don't think you win that game with any other quarterback. It's just something about Drew on that fast track in the Superdome. Just so good, so efficient. And my favorite moment I'll always think of outside of the big ones in the playoffs is him going 29 of 30 on a Monday Night Football game. And what does he immediately bring up? The one incompletion he has. Like, he was the definition of a perfectionist. So he deserves it. I just hope the Saints can actually win when he's in the building. It feels like when he gets there, they always lose lately and lose in pretty convincing fashion. So I'd like to see them honor him the right way with getting a W there.
Chris Rosvoglou, the host of the Straight Up Saints podcast, joining us here on the Miguez Mindset. Chris, before you go, man, tell our listeners where they can find your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can check me out on X at Rosvoglou Report. They could also check out the podcast Straight Up Saints on Apple and YouTube for Boo Crew Media, and also check out the written work at thespun.com.
Chris, really appreciate your time, man. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at ESPN Southwest Louisiana and follow us on social media as well at ESPN_SWLA. We'll be back next week talking college baseball and more NFL offseason news here on the Miguez Mindset on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Charleston.